Hello everyone. So we're going to talk about movements of joints in this lecture video. So it's important because later on we'll learn about the actions for the muscles for the later exams. So you will need to memorize the names of the muscles and where they're located, but you'll also need to know what they do and the movement. So the term that we use for that is actions. So what actions have the do we use that muscle for? So for example, what I'm talking about is if you're planning to go into physical therapy or doing something like where your patient, has to go through some kind of rehabilitation, then you need to know the names of all these terms like flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, and you may have heard them before. Well, we're really going to need to lock it down for this class. So there are two kinds of actions we're going to start with. So there's angular, that's a change in angle of a joint. And there's rotational, that's turning around an axis. So the word angular refers to the angle. So you have an angle that's like 90 degrees. You might have an angle that's maybe 120 degrees. So what's going on here is, it can be either more acute or basically it's an angle. So those are going to be the movements that you can actually measure using an angle or a protractor or the other type of you know, device maybe. So it's going to be, another one is going to be rotational. And this is the one that's going to be turning around axis. An example of that would be maybe moving your head left and right. So that's going to be rotational. If I have my palm and I turn my palm um, down, then that's a rotational. And if I fix my forearm or I move my shoulder, that's also rotational. So that's the one that you cannot measure with a protractor, and that's going to be rotational. Angular, you can measure with a protractor. This is the image that your textbook is using to break it down. So it's almost like physics. You pretend that you got a machine, um, and this machine has a line that could be a pencil, and then that's your plane. So moving, it's your moving point, linear motion, and then changing on the angular motion. This is circumduction that we learned about before, and then rotating is the rotational. And this is giving an example of a joint that's able to do these different types of motions. So here's angular. So there's some type of motions that you can do with angular. One is called abduction and adduction, and flexion and extension. And then last one is circumduction or circumduction, sorry. So um, the the way we define it, so we have these two images to look at for reference. So basically, abduction is defined as going away from midline. So now say that here, away from midline. That's abduction here. First one, abduction. In the lab, I'll be referring to these as abduction or adduction. So I'm going to say that as well, so there's no confusion. So abduction, and then the other one, I'm gonna call it adduction. So it's easier to understand, you're not getting confused. So abduction is away from midline. Think about something maybe getting kidnapped or getting abducted. They're being taken away from their home. So this is away from midline. So let me draw a midline here. So let's see. Yeah. So here is the, oh, that's blue. Let me change color. So this is the midline here, and abduction would be going away from the midline. As you move your arm up, it's going away, it's going further away from the midline. As you're moving it back, it's adduction. So that's adduction. So we have our arm, and arm is going moving up and down, and that's going to be considered angular because you can measure the angle as you move your arm up. So you could say this is less than 90 degrees, and this is maybe still less than 90 degrees. If it was straight up here, then that would be 90 degrees. So that's considered angular. If you move your hand up and it goes away from the midline, that's considered to be abduction. And if you move it back towards the midline, that's adduction. So let me write that for you as well. So adduction is towards the midline. So if you bring your arm towards the body, that's going to be towards the midline, and that's adduction. And abduction is going to be away, and adduction is going to be towards the midline. So it's just remember the prefix. And as you're learning about these movements, I highly recommend doing them. You know, practicing them. It's just easy. It makes it easier to understand. So let's look at another picture. Let me clear this up first. This is an image 8.3, figure 8.3 from your textbook. This is also showing abduction and adduction of the legs. So these movements you can not only do it with your arm, you can also do them with your legs, your hands. That's abduction and adduction with your hands, even with your fingers. So when you bring your fingers towards the midline, that's abduction. And then if you take them away from the midline, that's adduction. And you can think of maybe your finger here, this point here as a midline, basically abduction. And as you bring them closer together, that's adduction. And you can think of your ring finger as a midline. And then we have this one here called flexion and extension. That basically means to curl. So let me see. Flexion means to curl. Let me see if I can write to here. Curl. And then extension means to straighten. So I think I spelled it right, maybe. But I'm trying to say, oh, I can't fix it anymore. But I was trying to write straighten. So it means to straighten. Flexion means to curl. So that's going to be curling. Extension means to straighten. So if you got your wrist, maybe, let's see here. So you're curling here, and if you were to straighten the arm, that's extension. And if you go past this point, then straightening, like right here, that's hyperextension. Hyper means more, so you can extend it at 180 degrees. And if you stop right there, it's extension. But if you go past 180-degree angle, then that's hyperextension. So flexion and extension, anytime you have a limb, you can do that. So here you have some other body parts being shown. That. So arm, flexing your arm and then extending it, straightening it. You can also do it with your hip and your leg. You can do it with your spine and your neck as well. So if you make your elbow straight, that's extension, but you can do it with your spine and your neck. So if your neck, you look down, that's flexion, and if you look up, that's extension. And then if you look way back like this here, that's a hyperextension. So this is flexion, that's extension, and then going back past that point, 180-degree point, that's hyperextension. And then you can do that with your spine as well. And with your legs. So I mentioned in the lab that the thigh over here is between your hips and your knee, down your knee here. So that's your thigh, and then this part is your leg. Your knee and your ankle is between your knee and your ankle is your leg. Okay, so what's happening here? If you kick your knee forward, you're that's considered to be flexion at the hip. And if you kick your knee forward at the hip, but if you kick it back, that's extension. So this is a little bit confusing because it's different parts for your upper leg and then different movement for your lower leg. So this is flexion if you kick your knee this way, and if you kick it back, that's extension. But for your hip, it's the opposite. So I'm gonna see if I can write that here. So if you kick your knee backwards, that's going to be extension at the hip. So that's going to move the buttocks, and that's going to be flexion forward. So I'll write it down since it's not on the image. So here. Okay, so I was going to draw these. So if you were to kick your leg forward like that, that's flexion. Let me say that here since I think flexion. That's forward, forward. And hopefully you guys can see the text. And if you kick your thigh or hip back like this, then like this, that's going to be extension. Let me say that. That's extension of the hip slash thigh. And then if you were to then if you're going to do the same thing with the knee. So if you were to kick your knee up, that's flexion. And if you were going backwards, then that's going to be extension. It's opposite for the hip and thigh. So if you go ahead and you kick your leg forward, and if you kick your leg forward like that, that's going to be so if you kick your leg forward like that, that's going to be extension of the leg. So first we were talking about this upper part of the leg. Now we're talking about the lower part of the leg. I have some images to kind of clear this up. This is going to be extension. And if you were to kick your knee back like this, and that's going to be flexion of the knee leg. This lower part is known as the leg. So that's when they have flexion, and that's what's going to be talking about here. So let me show you another image that goes over this here. So this is if you're kicking your knee up, that's flexion of the knee, and this is extending the knee. Whereas for the hips, it's opposite. If you're kicking the um, the knee up, it's flexing for the hip and thigh, and then going back is extension for the hip. So it's a little bit difficult to understand. So maybe do these movements as you're reviewing these. And last one we had was the circumduction. So basically what you're doing is because when the knee is straight, going back here, when the knee is straight, that's extension. And if you bend your knee, you're bending it backwards, and that's called flexion. So if you were sitting down, you kick your foot forward to kick the soccer ball, that's going to be extension of the leg, but going forward is the flexion of the thigh. So it's a little bit confusing because you have extension that's going forward, and then you have a flexion that's going backwards in one of those areas. So the next one is circumduction, like I said, and that is you're facing somebody, then you go ahead and you have your palm fixed and your elbow fixed, and you're moving it in a circle like that. And that is circumduction. It's pretty easy to understand. So it's like let me see, one more picture here. So it's like if you have something and you were drawing a circle and the circumduction. And then we have the rotational movements, and then the rotational we have something that's basically turn around some kind of axis. So if you have your foot can tap left to right, and that's medial and lateral. So you're wondering why can't we just say tap your foot left to right? Because we have 2 feet. So if you have 2 feet, you tap your one foot in one direction, that's going to be lateral. And if you tap your other foot in the same direction, that's going to be in the opposite direction, that's going to be lateral, but if in the same direction, then it's medial. So it doesn't make sense. That's why we're going to use medial and lateral. So for left and right, we can maybe apply this to a body part that's only single, so not like feet, because we have 2 feet. Other body parts, if you have one head, you turn your head left to right. That you turn your head to left. That's one rotation. You turn your head to right. That's another rotation. So in that case, we don't say lateral or medial, because for that we don't have to look at the middle part or the medial line. So maybe try turning your head to the right, and that's lateral, and now turn it to the left, that's still lateral. So it doesn't really make sense to use medial or lateral. So we mentioned in the first lecture, when you're in anatomical position and you're laying down, you're going to be in a supine or prone position. So you can use the term for your palm of your hand as well. So if your palm is your hand is facing up, you're laying down facing up, that's going to be called supine here, like you're holding a bowl of soup. And then supination. And then the opposite is going to be prone, facing downward. So that's prone position, pronation. So basically, the palm of your hand is the only thing that has action. So supination is holding a bowl of soup. Pronation is the opposite. That's going to be facing downwards. Then that's going to be a type of a rotational movement. And medial and lateral, you can see here, if you were to move towards the midline, that's medial rotation. Away from the midline, that's lateral rotation. And we can say that this is the midline. So this was the last one, pronation and supination here. And this is going left and right. And here they're showing you the same movements and just a different figure, supination and pronation. So that's you can either move at the elbow here, and you can also move at the shoulder. That's going to be lateral rotation and medial rotation. But if you move at the elbow, that's supination, and pronation, it's moving your palm. Some body parts are very unique and they have their specific articulations, their specific special movements. So we have few of those. We have eversion, inversion, and if you look at your foot and your big toe here, basically that's eversion and then inversion. I have another picture that I'm going to show you. So your big toe, the hallux, is going to be inversion. If your little toe goes up, that's going to be eversion. So eversion is your little toe is up, and then inversion is your big toe is up. And then we have dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So if you were to go to a podiatrist office, if they're going to call this, I think, pronation or something. They have different clinical terms or different terms in the clinical settings. We have different way of walking or anatomical position. So we have all these movements: dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, lateral flexion, protraction, retraction, opposite, reposition, elevation, and depression. So this is special articulations that are for different parts of the body. This is eversion and then inversion. So this is kind of showing you that movement here. Inversion, your big toe is up. Eversion, your little toe is up. Let's look at dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So since we have different ways of walking, or in some composition, our foot is flat on the ground. If our foot is flat on the ground and you bring it up like that and your toes go up, that's flexion. But if your toes go down, that's also flexion. So we have two types of flexions, but depending on which part of the foot is flexing, if it's the dorsal part, then it's called dorsiflexion. And if it's the bottom part of the foot, then it's plantar flexion. So if you have a wart here, then it's called a plantar wart because it's in that area. So that's dorsiflexion versus plantar flexion, and they're both flexion. But you have different terms. So when your toes are up like that, that's dorsiflexion. That's dorsiflexion, and then that's plantar flexion when your toes are touching the ground. This one here is referring to your jaw. So you have these pterygoid muscles that make your jaw go forward, and that's going to be protraction, and if you're going backwards, that's retraction. So you can stick your lower jaw, and that's very unique in animal world. You know, we can manipulate some of the things that other animals can't do. We are all, you know, mammals. So here's the thumb. So you can stick, basically, you can manipulate our thumb in a way that other animals can't. This is called opposition. You're touching your thumb with your little finger. So you can manipulate a lot of tools. Um, um, and you can reposition it. So that's called opposition when you're touching your thumb with your little finger. And reposition your thumb takes basically putting it back. That's hold on. That's repositioning, and then that's opposition. So we can actually do 6 actions with our thumb. We can only do 4 with our fingers. So we can manipulate objects much better compared to other primates. If you were give a pencil to a chimpanzee or other primate, they will hold that pencil or a pen with their fingers because they don't have this opposition movement with their thumb. But if you were to give this to a human, then we would use it. We would use our thumb to hold it, and we can write pretty much. We can do very, you know, micro movements with our hand. So that's it. So because of this, we were able to create tools and use tools to do a lot more things compared to other primates. So that's going to do it for this chapter. You're going to be required to know about these different movements, the knee joint, the shoulder joint, a bit more in detail in the lab. So we're also going to require you to memorize all these different actions, because when we take the lab exam, we're going to study all the muscles, and you need to know the actions for all these muscles. So this is very important that you know all these movements. So I'm going to end this here. Thank you for listening.